Hello everyone. We're finally going to start getting into LDS Doctrine and Covenants 132. Since I like to do short videos and this is such a large topic, I'll probably do several videos. If you want more in-depth analysis and commentary on this specific subject, I encourage you to check out Michelle Stone's 132 Problems podcast. I will put the link in the description. First, we'll look for scriptural contradictions of 132, including contradictions within itself. Let's just start at the beginning and read until we find something wrong. Verily, thus saith the Lord unto you, my servant Joseph, that inasmuch as you have inquired of my hand to know and understand wherein I the Lord justified my servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and also Moses, David, and Solomon my servants, as touching the principle and doctrine of their having many wives and concubines. Okay, that didn't take long. So this verse frames the document by claiming that it was received as a response when Joseph asked God why or how he justified Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, etc. in taking many wives and concubines. The problem is, it's a nonsensical question, because there's no indication that God did justify them, let alone that it was a principle and a doctrine. Let's go through these people. Abraham is mentioned several more times in 132, such as verse 34. God commanded Abraham, and Sarah gave Hagar to Abraham to wife. And verse 65 mentions Sarah, who administered unto Abraham according to the law, when God commanded Abraham to take Hagar to wife. There's a glaring contradiction between these verses and the Bible. Recall that according to the Bible, Hagar was Sarah's handmaid or bondwoman, which is a nicer way of saying slave, who Sarah decided to use as a surrogate mother. Her capacity as a childbearing substitute for Sarah seems to be the only connection in which Hagar is called a wife. She is subsequently referred to as the bondwoman. Note also that Abraham having a child by Hagar was not a commandment from God as 132 claims. It was Sarah's idea. In fact, the only commandment that God gives Abraham regarding Hagar is to listen to Sarah and kick Hagar out of his household. God even refers to Hagar as a bondwoman and not Abraham's wife. It seems that if any marriage ceremony was even conducted, God did not consider it as legitimate as Hagar's enslavement. Abraham is mentioned repeatedly in 132 as the archetype of polygamy. It strongly implied that polygamy is the law and promise that Abraham was given by God, by which his posterity would be numerous as the stars or sands. And it's also strongly implied that other chosen ones will have to do the same. In verse 32, Joseph is allegedly told, Go ye therefore and do the works of Abraham, enter ye into my law, and ye shall be saved. It's clear from the verses before and after that the works of Abraham referred to is polygamy. But Jesus also uses this phrase, and to him it means something quite different. When Jesus was confronting the Pharisees, they answered and said unto him, Abraham is our father. And Jesus saith unto them, If ye were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham. But now ye seek to kill me, a man that hath told you the truth which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. It's clear that the works of Abraham that Jesus refers to are works of righteousness and faith, which he contrasts with the murder in the hearts of the Pharisees. It's doubly ironic that whoever wrote 132 tries to use that phrase to justify polygamy, since Joseph also told the truth which he had heard of God in his repeated denunciations of polygamy, and that also inspired murder in the hearts of those who disagreed. Continuing with the problems brought up in the very first verse, Isaac had only one wife, Rebekah. Genesis 24 makes rather a big deal of her. Jacob was not so lucky. He was cheated by his lying father-in-law into marrying two wives, who then used their slaves Bilhah and Zilpah as surrogate mothers in a twisted battle to get the most children from Jacob. Moses may or may not have had two wives, depending on how you read the text, but there's nothing to indicate that he was married to two women simultaneously. And David and Solomon's wife whoring is specifically condemned in Jacob chapter 2 in the Book of Mormon, which I've discussed in another video, which I will link to in the description. Since Joseph is allegedly asking God about the justification of David's polygamy, and the Book of Mormon says that it's not justified, it's strange that an explanation is not provided. David is mentioned again in verse 39. David's wives and concubines were given unto him of me by the hand of Nathan my servant, and others of the prophets who had the keys of this power. And in none of these things did he sin against me, save in the case of Uriah and his wife. There are a few problems with this. One is that David's early wives were clearly not given to him by Nathan, or any prophet. The ones we have any details about were marriages for power, such as Michal, the daughter of King Saul, who David won from the king by murdering and mutilating 200 men. David also married for wealth, like in 1 Samuel 25, when, after a rich man named Nabal refused David's request to feed his men, he prepared to murder all the males in the household. But Abigail gave David the food to placate him. Then, in short order, Nabal died, and David married Abigail, inheriting all the wealth. About the other wives, the Bible just says David took them, nothing about their being given by any prophet. But the Bible in 2 Samuel 12 says that God gave David his wives, right? Well, yes, but actually no. As Nathan confronts David over his adultery and murder, he says, "Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel, and I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul. And I gave thee thy master's house and thy master's wives into thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah." When God made David the king, he inherited all that Saul had: house, wives, and country. The wives are part of a list of stuff, a far cry from the polygamous sealing ceremonies of the early LDS Church, or what's described in 132. Another big problem with verse 39 of 132 is the claim that David's wives were given by the hand of Nathan my servant and others of the prophets who had the keys of this power. Not only is there no record of this in the Bible, but who were these other prophets? The Bible only mentions 2 prophets during David's lifetime, Samuel and Nathan. Samuel died after David married his first wife, Michal, and Samuel is not mentioned in connection with that marriage. Nathan is not mentioned as performing any of the subsequent marriages. And if one claims there must have been other prophets, how? Since verse 7 of 132 says, "There is never but one on the earth at a time on whom this power and the keys of this priesthood are conferred." 132 is contradicting itself as well as the Bible. The modern LDS Church in their Gospel Topics essay states that the revelation on plural marriage, recorded in Doctrine and Covenants 132, emerged partly from Joseph Smith's study of the Old Testament in 1831. This is not correct. Joseph wasn't studying the Old Testament in 1831. He claimed to be restoring lost material through revelation. This is where the inspired version, or new translation of the Bible, and the LDS Book of Moses come from. The problem for the LDS Church is that Joseph's revelatory additions leave the marriage stories of all these men untouched. LDS Doctrine and Covenants 132 would make more sense if Joseph had changed the Bible so that God justified or commanded polygamy, but he didn't. Of course, the manuscript of the inspired Bible is one of the few documents that Brigham Young couldn't steal from Joseph's wife, Emma. If he had, who knows what revisions would have been made to try to make 132 appear more legitimate. But as it is, Joseph's inspired version of the Bible stands as a testimony against 132, which may be why the LDS Church still refuses to use the full text of the Bible from the prophet they allegedly revere. We've only dealt with material brought up in the first verse of 132, but we've already seen that it contradicts the Book of Mormon, Joseph's inspired version of the Old Testament, Joseph's own writings and speeches, and itself. Its disjointed and meandering text reads like someone told an artificial intelligence to write a justification of polygamy in the language of the King James Bible. And the content only gets worse, including death threats and virgin collecting. I can't help but think that the LDS Church continuing to attribute this slop to Joseph Smith instead of Brigham Young and his associates is sheer defamation. What Joseph said about another pro-polygamy document, which used a lot of the same arguments, I believe he would say about LDS Doctrine and Covenants 132. I do not wish to have my name associated with the authors in such an unmeaning rigmarole of nonsense, folly, and trash. And as I hope you know by now, I believe Joseph.